So, my name is Dean Trantalis, and thank you very much for inviting me here this morning. It's been a real honor and a privilege and a great life experience to be in public service. Now being mayor, now entering in my 6th year, and it's had a lot of very interesting challenges, as well as, I would say, opportunities that I don't think I would ever have been able to experience had I not been in this position. But before I got to this position, obviously, I have a life story, as we all do. And it really, I think that we all share similar life experiences, but at the same time, we all have a separate path that we've taken, not always by choice. Sometimes we just sort of lumber through life and not realize what we're doing or where we're going. We just keep plodding through, and I think that what I've learned is that starting out young and growing up and going to school and starting a career and realizing who I am and where I'm going, sometimes those things aren't so obvious. Sometimes those things are not so clear. You make choices, and sometimes they're the best choices, and sometimes they're not. But so, as Evan said, I came from a very small town in Connecticut. My grandparents were immigrants from an island in Greece, very poor village. They came to America like millions of others did at the turn of the 20th century, and looking for opportunity. My grandfather was 13 years old when he came over on the boat. I don't know how he got here, but somehow he finagled his way here. And it was a common theme back then. A lot of poor villages, war-torn countries, people trying to escape the horror of their homeland. Boy, where have we heard that, right? It's a constant refrain that we hear, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in Asia, or whether it be in Central America. It seems to me that America has always been the place where people feel that there's some chance for revival, some chance for a future. And I think America being the land of immigrants, we all seem to share that common experience, one way or the other. And I think that we often overlook that common experience when we start to make decisions in today's world as to how to deal with those situations that we have been dealing with for a very, very long time in this country. So they all settled in a small place where there were lots of factories and easy work and no skill required. And my parents met. They both went to the same church, and so little by little they started a family and became one of 4 children. And so here I am in a small New England town, learning about mathematics and science and history and myself. So I really just thought of myself as an ordinary person, nothing special. I always thought of myself as somebody who could go to school and get through school and do my best. I did okay in high school. I did better in college, and I think we just go through life sometimes just going to the next grade, where those decisions are kind of made for you. You go to high school. Well, in my community, you were expected to go to college, which I then did. Then you say to yourself, when you graduate, now what do I do with myself? So I took a couple of years off because I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I realized that law school was always something that I wanted to do, but law school shouldn't have been an obvious choice. So after experiencing the world, going to different places, taking on different jobs, I ultimately ended up going to law school, graduating, and went back to Connecticut. But at that time, I realized that something was just not right. I wasn't really feeling like that's where I belonged. Why? Because people in my age, in my late 20s, they were either starting families, getting married, or you found most young people moving out of the state. It's a shrinking population, wasn't really a lot going on there. And anyway, long story short, I ended up coming to Florida. And never been to the East Coast of Florida. And so my roommate from law school and I joined together. We started a law firm. And I thought I'd come here for a year or two. But as soon as I hit Fort Lauderdale, I was like a kid in a candy store. Why do I say that? Yes, it's fun to be here in our city. It's lots going on. But there was more to it than that. I came down here actually to see who I really was. And how important self-realization is probably the greatest hurdle that you could ever try to overcome. And once you do, you feel so much better about yourself. So I came down here thinking I might be gay. And I didn't want to experiment in my parents' backyard. So coming to Florida was a great opportunity for me in more than one way. So I have a short story to share with you. So I met this girl, and she was the assistant city attorney for West Palm Beach. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm gonna date girls and I'm gonna see what it's like to date a guy. But she came along first. She was beautiful, she was blonde, she was fun, and she had a sports car. And so one night she called and she said, hey, there's a new restaurant opening up in West Palm Beach. Why don't you come up and we'll, it's a friends and family night. We'll have a great time together. And we're going to really, why don't you come up? So I drove up and it was great. It was a Mexican restaurant. It was free food, lots of margaritas. And back then I drank a lot more than I do now. And we were sloshed. So she invited me back to her apartment. And so anyway, as we were getting back into her apartment, she says, please excuse me for a moment. I need to use the bathroom. So I said, okay. So 3 hours later, she comes out and she was completely wrecked. She had gotten very sick from all the margaritas. I felt so bad for her. But to me, it said, this is not going to work out. There was a sign from God that this was not a situation for you. You need to fully realize who you are. And we never saw each other again. And then I realized that this was a signal telling me that I really need to focus on who I am and my true sexual orientation. So it was about that time. Fort Lauderdale was much like we know Wilton Manors to be. There was no Wilton Manors back then. The Miami scene was pretty dormant. It was all about Fort Lauderdale and Key West. And so, like I said, I was like a kid in a candy store, being young, being fresh out of school, starting a new career. I felt really liberated to be able to come and experiment and realize who I was. But let's go back again to growing up. And I think we all feel a little bit special within ourselves, or different, or unusual. I remember, my parents gave me the name Dean, and I always felt very self-conscious about that name, because who else is called Dean? Nobody. I wanted to be a John. My father was John. I wanted to be a Peter. I wanted to be a common name, because you don't want to stand out. You want to fit in. And, when you have the name Dean, it's like you're not fitting in. And when you have a name like Trantalis, it goes even beyond that. And then when you're not Catholic or Jewish, you're Greek Orthodox, and everybody says, well, what is that? You actually feel a little marginalized in your own community, and you kind of just find your own way in life, and you hang out with those that are like you, and you try to get past those insecurities that you are handed, like a name. And I think that And those are the kinds of issues that we kind of cling to as we're growing up, which is unfortunate because we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to feel inhibited because of certain, certain fears that you have, not being able to fit in. It's all about wanting to fit in, right? And fit in life and trying to be accepted and liked by everybody else. Unfortunately, you carry those same habits when you're in political office. You want everyone to like you, but then you learn you're not going to be able to please everybody. But the good thing about that experience as a child and then growing up is the idea that you have the ability to get through life and become who you want to become, despite all of these fears that you may have. You get past those fears. So everybody does it at a different age. Some people are young and they get through it and they're totally self-realized and I applaud some of these young people who are able to stand on street corners and really applaud and be thankful for who they are and demonstrate against others who are trying to denigrate them. I don't know if I could have done that as a child, but I was able to do that as I grew up. And I think that it takes everybody accepts the challenges of life at different stages in their life. And so when I hear about guys that came out later in life and didn't come out early in life, I don't judge them because everybody has to accept life in their own time, in their own space. Before we began this talk, we were put into a very relaxed mode, all right? And our mind tends to get filled with thoughts that are distracting and that are often disillusioning. But the reality is that you can focus in life. You can focus, you can take control, and that's kind of what I did when I started my career here. I did experience prejudice. People did recognize me as being a gay man. I know I was denied opportunity. I know that I had to find my own way. I know that growing up today as a member of the LGBT community, it's a lot different than it was 40 years ago when I first moved to this area. In 1990, there was an effort to add sexual orientation to the Human Rights Ordinance here in Broward County. And an ordinance that already protected people based on their race and their religion and all these other categories, but not sexual orientation. It was kind of groundbreaking to think about. So the way the law stood back then, you had to have a public referendum to add that in Broward County. So some local activists got together a ballot measure, and in 1990, we lost miserably. There was a fear campaign, all the negative images that you still hear about today about grooming and trying to attack children and all of that. All that was unabashedly used against the measure, and we lost 60% to 40%. So everyone was like crying and wringing their hands, and I said, "Are you kidding, people? We got 40%. We can build on that." And then, unbeknownst to a number of people, until later in the years, there was a state representative who later became a judge, but while he was state representative, his name was Steve Farron, who just died a few weeks ago. And Judge Farron had a brother who died from HIV. While he was in the state legislature, he had a special statute passed that allowed the county government itself to add sexual orientation or to amend the ordinance without the public having to amend it. So by 1995, we were able to cobble together the votes, and 6-1, we added sexual orientation. It was groundbreaking. It was the first time in the entire state that a county was able to pass that and not have it overturned. And so Broward County is the hallmark of activism and inequality, and it continues to be, where this county commission has added gender identity and expression and continues to try to find ways to generate equality in a world that keeps pushing back against it. So we talk about equality, we talk about Martin Luther King. I just came from a breakfast at the First Baptist Church that's put on by the YMCA to talk about the legacy of Dr. King. And while the speakers were speaking, I was thinking about, because I'm a child of the 60s, I remember Dr. King, and I remember seeing him on TV and all the demonstrations and marches that he did. I watched his March on Washington on TV, and I knew he was going to be a target. And I knew he was going to be a target because in the 1960s, there was very far-reaching federal legislation that was passed, the Voting Rights Act, anti-discrimination laws, all of that was being passed. And I could tell that there was going to be pushback. And then you saw a presidential candidacy from George C. Wallace, who was part of that backlash, okay? And I knew something was going to happen to Dr. King, because what happens in America is that while we want to think we do the right thing, there are always others that feel that your right thing is not their right thing. And today, while we see advances that the LGBT community has made in terms of non-discrimination, marriage equality, gays in the military, all those things are great when you're trying to achieve equality for everybody. But then there are those who feel that your equality is erasing away their priority. People who feel superior or feel that they're more just to their place in life than what you are trying to take away from them. It's such a myth, but people believe in the myth. And because of that, America will continue to be a seesaw of rights back and forth where everyone thinks they're right. It's like a Greek tragedy. Hate to bring that up, but in Greek tragedies, no one's wrong. There are always two rights, and the tragedy is that one of those rights gets destroyed. One of those rights is overcome by the other. And so the tragedy in America today is that we have not been able to figure out why we can't coexist with everyone feeling that they have equality and that they have equal rights. America continues to think that your rights and the fact that you have rights meant that you've taken away something that I should have. So we'll get there, hopefully, someday, before we destroy ourselves. But when you see the seesaw of conflict back and forth, it's one of those situations where you have to posture yourself to make sure that you find yourself not getting overwhelmed by the conflict that will continue to absorb America. Now, here I am in public office. I'm the mayor of a good city, great city, Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale continues to be a destination for people, not just in America, but from all over the world. A few weeks ago, the Prince and Princess of Monaco were here to help dedicate the aquatic center that we just opened up. We're being recognized as an international city. And the thing is that the more and more attention we get as a community, the more opportunity this brings us, okay? We have more investment, more people wanting to move here and help the city grow and create new amenities. And as far as I'm concerned, the more people that come here from all different walks of life and the more diversity that we create, I feel that that's how we become a more enriched community. So by becoming a more enriched community, I think we get to sample a little bit of what everybody's about. And I think that's important because we become better people as we get to learn more about one another. So being a mayor of a city like this and being an openly gay mayor, needless to say that I will probably be a target someday. A political target, hopefully that's all. But I recognize every day that somebody sees me as a symbol of a threat to them. And I do what I can every single day to make sure that people do not feel threatened by what they feel I represent. And that's important because people are always looking for excuses to justify their fears and to justify their failures in life. And if they can point to somebody else as being the cause of that failure, then once you become their scapegoat and they can eliminate you, then they feel they've succeeded. That's not the way we should get through in life. The way we should get through in life is to collaborate and to cooperate and to ensure that the best interest of the most people is what we are trying to achieve, rather than the self-interest that we feel that we need to hold on to. So that gets us back to growing up again. So, growing up is all about wanting to feel liked, wanting to feel appreciated, and wanting to feel special. And I think in our own minds, when we grow up, whether you're 3 or you're 30, you kind of feel special. You feel the whole, you have your own world in your head and you feel that you're a special person. And you know what? You really are. Everybody is. Your thoughts are your own. Your feelings are your own. And you should take ownership of all of that. But at the same time, we need to open our minds. We need to open our hearts. And we need to open our feelings. And to express your feelings and to be self-realized, embracing who you are, is probably the most liberating experience that anybody could have. And to accept who you are is probably the best thing that will ever allow you to get past all those fears and inhibitions that you had as a child. Because once you get past that, the roadblock to life is taken away from you and you can really succeed. And that's when I felt I finally really took off, when I became a self-realized individual. And so here I am today, speaking to you, talking about being there, and I think that's the best message I can convey today. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I hope this has been helpful.
I'd like to open it up for questions for Mayor Trantalis, and do have the mic for those with hearing issues.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone, I'm Shavara, and thank you, Mayor Trantalis, and thank you for the mic. And I just have to say this as a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I encourage you, if you're going to speak, use the mic. We do not know the differences that exist in this room around hearing, and want to be mindful and respectful. I want to thank you so much, and I'm curious, you mentioned March on Washington, and that made me think about Bayard Rustin. For those of you who don't know, he is the architect of the March on Washington. He was an openly gay man. There's a brilliant documentary called Brother Outsider. I am curious, as you were talking about some of your own experiences and how things have shifted in terms of equity, what differences are you seeing between communities of color within the LGBTQ plus community and the white community, and how is that shifting? What differences have you seen? And what types of actions could we be taking as community to also be supportive for those of us who identify as allies?
It's a very complex question because, and there's no simple answer to that, because, any marginalized community, whether it be a community of color, whether it be a community based on sexual orientation, whether it be a community based on a country of origin, any marginalized community does not gain by embracing that marginality. In other words, just sticking to yourself, sticking to your own. I don't think that that individual group will ever succeed. I do believe that today there are a lot of efforts in the LGBT community to try to embrace communities of color, communities of origin, but somehow in spite of the fact that the gay community itself has been marginalized, there is still racism within the community. There is still racism within the African American community. There is racism and discrimination amongst certain immigrants who come from other countries and who want to keep out others who are not from their country, who don't speak their language. And that's not what America is about. America is about trying to being the melting pot of the world. And we've been very successful at that over the generations. So today, in the last 20 years especially, I've noticed that that there's something called tribalism, where everybody, you create your own little tribe and you kind of stick to everybody and you're comfortable in that world and you exclude everybody. Nobody else can come in. It's the biggest mistake Americans can make. Tribalism is what leads to separation, which leads to fear, which leads to conflict, and which leads to a division in a country that should never see division like we see today. And we see tribalism in political parties. We see tribalism between states. I'm experiencing it between cities. And I think to myself, boy, this is not the path that we should be taking. So yes, you've identified a problem. You're absolutely correct. And it's not the path we should be following. We need to be more open-minded and embracing and learn from one another.
Hi. Thank you so much. I loved your message about self-actualization. And it made me think of my father, who came out in his 60s. And it actually not only freed him, but I felt like it freed me, because I had created all these stories about why my parents got divorced, about money, and marriage is difficult. And when he came out, I said, how long have you known? He said, probably all my life. But, when I told your mother when we were young, all these stories just completely shifted. And I realized, wow, I'm so proud of him for finding out who he is, but now I kind of need to go back and figure out who I am with this new information. And that was about 3 years ago, and I kind of dedicated my life now to helping people find their purpose and truth, doing Reiki and meditation. That's just my practice. But I was curious about when you did go down that path of self-actualization, what you'd recommend for people to kind of figure out who they are when they're in this mask of, fear.
Well, so when I finally accepted the fact that I was a gay man, which was in my late 20s, and it's interesting when you feel it, because I truly feel it's a hormonal thing, and I think that it materializes in people at different times in their life. So there are people who are 5 years old who realize they are, and there are people in their 50 when they finally realize they are. But a lot of the coming out stories that you hear, a lot of them are sort of shaped by the world in which they live. All right, if they've already been married and they have children, or their culture is unaccepting, or if they feel that their career would be impacted by by the disclosure of their sexual orientation, a lot of that bears on their decision of how they're going to self-realize. So here I am, young lawyer, starting out in Florida, self-realizing that he's a gay man in a world like Fort Lauderdale, which is extremely button-down collar, very, very conservative. And so what did I do? I made a trip to Brooks Brothers, and I started buying Brooks Brothers suits, so people would think I'm conservative, and I'm one of them. And so by day I was that, by night I was not. And so I kept my world separate. I kept my career people and my professional people separate from my friends, and that was the life I lived for a while. My parent, now I'm in my 30s. My parents are wondering why I'm not getting married, and then eventually, they found out, and they were not happy about it. And I think throughout their life, they were still not happy about it. Of course, they were not happy about the fact that my sister moved down to Florida with me, and my mother still never forgave me for that. But the point is that it is a tough decision. So your dad, carrying that awareness within him all this time, clearly his decision was shaped by the world around him, by the fact that he had children, the fact that he lived in a world, had a career, and maybe even his religion, felt that he needed to be quiet about it. But you can't. You are who you are. You don't always have to wear your orientation on your sleeve, but at the same time, once you are able to be yourself, it's an extremely liberating experience. And your dad probably felt like a different person. I belong to a Democratic club. It's called the Dolphin Democratic Club, and it's an LGBT club. And a few years back, this senior citizen came to the club. She was probably in her 70s, and she started talking about her story. For the first she was like 70 years old. The first 67 years of her life, she was a guy, and she had been married. She had children, but she realized that her gender was not that of a male. She did not identify as a male, but she lived a life as a male until her husband died, and then she became. She had gender assignment surgery, and and she said, "I finally am the person I've always wanted to be." And and it's really tough. Let me tell you. Yesterday I was watching a video that was done. It was a podcast. Are any of you familiar with the Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church? It's a very conservative, Christian-styled church. I don't say it's Christian-styled, because they really believe in discrimination, and I don't think Christianity believes in discrimination. So anyway, the pastor has this podcast, and Zachary, my assistant Zachary, by the way, this is Zachary Eakins-Duran. Thank you very much for being here this morning, Zach. So the podcast talks about how Scripture tries to explain what truth is. But truth is not relative, according to the pastor. Truth is not what you feel it is, it's what the Bible says. And when it comes to the issue of whether or not a man feels like he's a woman or a woman feels like he's a man, is not to be decided by that person, is to be decided by the Bible, okay? And so I'm thinking to myself, I don't believe that Jesus talked about, transgender. I don't think he ever attended a drag show. I don't think he ever experienced, gender issues. And I don't remember reading anything about that. So they make it up. And in making it up, it becomes, it's a questionable philosophy upon which to base a church. But anyway, that's their narrative, and they move forward with it. And I think that's so damaging to society, because when you start to impose your beliefs on others without a foundation, you are, you start to create the division in a society that is only going to create more conflict, and it's not a type of world where you're supposed to be embracing, non-judgmental, and you're supposed to welcome everybody under your roof, which is what Christianity is, which is what Judaism is, which is what Islam is. But people just don't want to talk that way. People just have their own agenda, and they use religion to justify their actions, even though that religion doesn't anywhere say what they're trying to profess. So it's a very difficult environment in which to live. But I still do my best to reach out to these places of worship and these other organizations that aren't as accepting. I may be criticized for doing it from time to time, but if you don't show love to them, they're never going to show love back to you.
Amen. One last question.
Yes, please.
It's not really a question, but hi, my name's Lori. I wanted to just thank you for sharing some of your experience and your story with us. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but
You don't want to hear the gory details.
yeah. I was hoping for some gory details. You know, I related to so much of your story, and you know, it's like when on the outside we are so very different, yet there's a lot of our journey that has been very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think the sharing of stories and being able to relate to other people, we're all looking for that belonging and that relatability. And I know, you know, as an artist, when you're creating artwork, at least for me, when I create my artwork, it has always been about kind of expressing that part of me that maybe I was looking for people to relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's received, it's a gift, you know. So I just appreciate you being vulnerable and talk. You don't know who's sitting in this room, you know, and what their beliefs and what their ideas are. And you talking so candidly is very appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
One final question here. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I second exactly what was just said, because this is part of the transformation of society, humanity, where we are transparent, vulnerable, open, loving, accepting, forgiving, and so you shine a light for the world, and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I recognize that, I feel that. So I'm wondering, what are the present issues, maybe that you see, that I don't see, because I'm not too plugged into, I guess, what's happening locally. So I would love to know, what do you see are the issues, and then how do we support? It could just be on the subject of the LGBTQ side of things, because I'm not really aware of what are the major discriminations that are still happening right now, or what the community is essentially facing, and how I can lend a hand from afar, or even just become more aware, which adds to the collective progress.
So the issues that I see today are kind of what I was alluding to earlier, and that is, you know, America represents certain ideals that we all feel that there are certain ideals that are truly American. Okay, equality and fairness and embracing, you know, people from wherever they come, and we've enacted a number of laws over the last several decades to ensure those rights and those freedoms. What I'm seeing is the pendulum swinging the other way. I'm seeing where we have a governor, okay, who in very oblique ways are trying to chip away at freedoms and rights that have been achieved. And they do so in a way that are very clever, but in reality are undermining the sense of equality that people should feel that they have here in the state of Florida. In the African American community, the Voting Rights Act, okay, which was passed in the mid-'60s, was not renewed, okay, and you know, these are rights that, you know, are basic to America. In fact, America is seen as the beacon of equality and democracy, and yet we ourselves are undermining those very freedoms that we claim that we represent. Okay. You see immigrants coming to this country. There were 50 immigrants that came Tuesday night. We had our city commission meeting, and I got a text from our police department that 50 immigrants washed ashore at the Bahia Mar. Okay, where was the governor? The governor had no problem spending $100,000 transporting immigrants from Texas up to New York City. But where was he to help those people who were desperate wherever they were coming? And we know that they were desperate. Why would you ride on the open seas in a shanty boat, knowing that you may never, ever reach the shore of anywhere, unless you were so desperate that you needed to be somewhere where you're not? My grandparents were those desperate people. My grandfather left at 13 because his mother found a way for him to get onto a boat, because back then when he emigrated, that was part of Asia Minor. It wasn't part of Greece. And Asia Minor is Turkey. And the Turkish government was drafting 13 and 14-year-olds to fight in the army against their enemies. So my great-grandmother didn't want her son to be fighting against her own people. And these are the kinds of desperate situations that people find themselves in. Gangs, people that, fear in the very villages in which they live. I mean, it's a sad, sad thing, and America can't be the destination for everybody in this world. I truly understand that. But where are we to help those, even if it's a temporary assistance? So you ask, what are the issues today? The issues today are trying to get back to the basic American values of helping others out of their desperate situations, trying to restore the equality that we were able to achieve, and to make sure that that these rights that we've once established are not whittled away and not taken away from us. That's what's happening today. And that's what we need to be aware of today. So you hear about these don't say gay laws, okay? The whole purpose of that law was not to protect third graders from listening about, gender issues and sexual orientation issues. It was a way to excite the base of right-wing philosophies that people say, oh, we're going to try to reduce the equality of gay people in the state of Florida. It has nothing to do with that. There was a demonstration over on the beach a few weeks ago. We heard that a far right-wing group was going to demonstrate on Fort Lauderdale Beach. So I put myself there. I went there and I started talking with them, and they don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to create attention, and the message that they had made no sense, but they got the attention, and the news media was out there, and the newspaper recorded it, and they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. And what was that? That was to show that they're not going to have their rights taken away from them, even though that was never the fear, okay? So I'm very upset about, where America's going today, because I grew up at a time, like I said, in the 60s, where it was all about freedom and liberation and equal rights, and it was an amazing era in which to grow up in. And now I'm seeing, here we are in 2020, 2023, where you see government, thrashing about, trying to, figure out how do I marginalize people that really that are hurting America. How many times have I heard people who say that they don't like the fact that when they walk into a room or they walk into a store and the person doesn't speak English? There's the guy in the corridor here, I asked him directions on how to get to this meeting. He said, I don't understand English. Now, I didn't hate him for that. I wish he knew English, because I don't know Spanish, okay? But that shouldn't anger a person. That's just, America is for everybody. And that's the problems that we're seeing today.
One last quick question. So, as members of the community, we all act as stakeholders in the vision.
What is your name?
Joshua Neville.
Josh.
We all act as stakeholders in the vision that Fort Lauderdale has for its future. Does Fort Lauderdale have a plan for enacting and engaging us as stakeholders for this vision of equality?
Well, fortunately, Fort Lauderdale has. The thing is, Josh, if you just work the system, that's the methodology. Just stay engaged, stay involved. Run for office. There are 2 members of the LGBT community that are sitting on the city commission right now. That's monumental. Never before in the history has that ever happened. Okay. When I became a commissioner first time, what was the first thing I did? I started to get people from my community to sit on advisory boards. Never before had they sat on advisory boards. And I populated my selections with people from my community who never felt they could be a part of the system. Well, not only are you a part of the system, you are the system now. Once you're in place, you have a seat at the table, that's the path to equality. Being present and being self-aware and being willing to assert what you feel is right. That's the path. Okay? It's not rocket science, right? It's just being engaged. And I remember Nick Harris. I don't know if any of you know Nick Harris. She's an activist in our community. And she sent a message she belongs to the Human Rights Campaign. And she gave a speech once. And this is the message that the Human Rights Campaign talks about. They say, the way to equality is to be present. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? And what that means is just be involved, be engaged, make people understand that you understand the awareness of the situation. And that's how you maintain the dignity of who we are as a community. I can tell you, if I were not mayor today, I don't know what would happen in terms of some of the laws that we have in our city. You know, we have laws that try to maintain equality, but I don't know if we would have the influence to have the city buy a table at an event where we recognize the city as being a sponsor. Things like that. Being present, being aware, and being engaged, that's the way we're going to maintain our equality.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.
And one of the best ways to be engaged and to be present is to show up to events like this and other people's stuff and other people's events. And there's various levels of engagement and being involved. There's only so many seats on the city commission and there's only so many advisory boards. But Andrew and myself have found various ways to create opportunities for artists, to put artificial reefs in the ocean, and it really just depends on what your passion, what your interest is, and you can certainly find your way if it's self-help, if it's coaching, if it's yoga, if it's meditation, or anything else in between. So we certainly encourage you to continue showing up to these events that we do for free every second Friday morning of the month. We're now going on our 5th year of hosting this event, and really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your lives to show up and be here.
And I think a special shout out needs to go to these guys, to Evan, to Andrew. Where are you? There you are back there. I mean, they are trailblazers. And the good thing is that, art, we're talking about, you're an artist. The one wonderful thing about art is it takes your mind away from the present and allows it to be transformed into what you're looking at and trying to interpret what you're seeing. And for that one moment, you're stepping away from reality. And that is so, it cleanses your mind, even for that one moment, okay? And you look at a painting or you look at a sculpture, or you look at some form of art, and you say to yourself, you start to imagine what that means to you. They started a program called Zero Empty Spaces, which is, at one point we had a lot of empty storefronts in Fort Lauderdale, and what greater place to exhibit art but in empty spaces, and it was just a wonderful idea. It was very successful. You took it around the country, even, right?
It's Natick, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
In your own neck of the woods.
And it filled a gap, but at the same time, it kept the feeling of a vibrant urban experience where you weren't just looking into a blank space. You were now giving an artist an opportunity to show their work and also to continue the experience of walking down the street in a very positive way. So my hat's off to you for that and all the other endeavors that you've undertaken, and thank you for bringing on this program.